Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for Monday, October 28th, and begin by giving an acknowledgement that we are holding this evening's meeting on the traditional territory of the WSÁNEĆ people. Now I'd like to move to public participation. We generally allot a maximum of 20 minutes, with each speaker permitted to speak for 3 minutes. We ask that you please state your name and an address and press the little button to see the red light for the microphone. And I'll call for a first time if there's anyone wishing to speak to council this evening. Try it again there.
There we go.
Sorry.
Perfect.
I got two.
Brutal. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Brad Stiles. I think you know that by now. My address is 2410 Beacon Avenue. I am one of the applicants for Happy Buddha Cannabis. I want to thank Council once again for their time and effort in regards to our application. I want to also thank our supporters, friends, family, strangers alike. We are truly touched by the kind words and encouragement. It has been fantastic. Over the past couple of days, we've been talking to shoppers in front of our store on Beacon, and we've received overwhelming support for retail cannabis in our location. Many people have emailed into the town voicing support for cannabis on Beacon. I want council to know the journey that we've been on that brings us here tonight. First and foremost, we're small business owners. One second. Small business is the backbone to Canada. It's what our country rides on. We are experienced retailers. Over the past 2 years, almost 2 years ago, Happy Buddha was just an idea. Along with the rest of Canada, we watched as cannabis became legal. We determined that we would explore the possibility of opening a legal cannabis store in Sydney. We weren't sure at first that a town the size of Sydney could support a store. A lot has happened since then. We've heard over and over again from people in Sydney and on the peninsula that they want a licensed cannabis store in Sydney. The ability to walk into a clean, nicely appointed store on Beacon and get some advice is what people want. It's legal. We are a good fit for Sydney, and we've realized that Sydney absolutely can support a cannabis store and wants one. It's a win-win. On August 12th, Sydney Council debated and passed a bylaw allowing for retail cannabis on Beacon. Following that decision, we began the process of applying to Sydney to be the first legal cannabis retail store. To date, we've spent just shy of $40,000. We have acted in good faith, and we've done everything correctly with our application. We've also done everything in the process, from attending meetings, of course, that's natural, finding the location, which took us 8 months to do, and fully renovating the store. We are true small business people. But tonight, we're here about a window requirement. The LCRB say all windows must be completely covered, and Sydney wants an interesting and active window. We agree with both sides. We strolled down Beacon Avenue yesterday, and I have to confess to having some frustration as we walked by a couple real estate offices, a bank, the TELUS building, a hardware store, a cigar store, at least a couple liquor stores with completely covered windows. This just doesn't seem fair to me. We're just looking for fairness in the process. No harm to the folks I just mentioned. I'm just pointing it out. Every cannabis retailer in BC has had to abide by the LCRB requirements. Since there are about 90 plus legal stores in BC, at least 90 solutions have been found. Together, I think we can find a solution. Cindy will discuss this shortly. Council, what I'm asking you for tonight is to recognize that we have acted in good faith. We've met our requirements for the application. We've invested time and finances into the venture. Please vote yes for our application. And again, I want to thank you. And sorry for the choppy mic.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Wright. I live at 2355 Breather Avenue in Sydney. I'd like to refute what Mr. Stiles said, that they've acted in good faith. They've had the retail store rented for longer than August 19th. They have an attitude that they are entitled to open a store in Sydney. We're not refuting that cannabis is legal, and we've only asked that they not be on Beacon Avenue. Another avenue would be much better suited to it. We have a very vibrant Beacon Avenue. A lot of family events happen, parades, many, many things. And I just don't think that Beacon Avenue is the right place for this store. Whether they change their window or not, it's just not, and I know what they're saying, that a lot of people want a cannabis store, and that's true, but not on Beacon. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, friends, and supporters. My name is Cindy Pendergast. I live at 8425 Lochside Drive, and I am one of the Happy Buddhas. First and foremost, again, thank you for everyone who wrote all of their emails, who showed up tonight, who support us in a myriad of ways. We know that we needed to demonstrate to council how much people in Sydney wanted the store. We have overwhelming support, we believe. In addition, the Chamber of Commerce polled Sydney's business community. The question that was asked was, do you support cannabis retail on Beacon Avenue? The answer from an overwhelming 75% majority was yes, from our business leaders here in town. We listened to you last week when you told us that our window wasn't inviting and it wasn't expressive enough. We had been trying so hard to please the province that we didn't do enough to show you that we could also make a non-transparent window delightful. So we've addressed that tonight. Late this afternoon, we received approval from the LCRB. This is the very first time that they have approved such a unique window. It's called a live window, and it's made up of gorgeous and lush greenery in various textures and colors of plants. To paraphrase a Seinfeld episode, they're real and they're spectacular. I'm wearing a new pink shirt tonight. I bought it from Moden Boutique on Beacon because Devon, a very stylish businesswoman, came up with our beautiful new concept, and we appreciate that. As Brad mentioned, there are already over 90 licensed cannabis stores right here in British Columbia. All of the municipalities and all of the retailers have had to work together to make this happen. Victoria even found a solution to a heritage building. Cannabis stores are opening all across Canada. 2 days ago, one opened in Langford. We are asking you to consider the large majority of ordinary folks and business folks here in BC who support us. We have simple values. We are simple people. Honesty, integrity, and steadfastness. We intend to give to Sydney, not to take. We believe the folks in Sydney and the business community support us, and we believe they've shown that to you very clearly. We respectfully ask you this evening to please approve our recommendation to the LCRB. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, I'm Gail Hazelhurst, and I live on Resthaven Drive in Sydney. Please do not allow a cannabis store on the 2400 block of Beacon Avenue, and preferably on any location fronting directly onto Beacon Avenue. A cannabis store needs to be located correctly in an area with adequate parking and room outside for customer lineups. As one of the very few legal cannabis stores on Vancouver Island, a possible Sydney cannabis store location would attract a very large number of recreational marijuana users to Sydney. Sydney already has a shortage of parking directly on Beacon Avenue, and this would worsen the parking situation along Beacon Avenue enormously. Also, a customer lineup outside the store would block Beacon Avenue's sidewalk and be very disruptive to visitors and residents. I ask that you please place this store in the correct location, and the area fronting Beacon Avenue is not the best location. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Angus. I live at Unit 162115 Amelia Drive. And to put it simply, I am in favor of the store being located where it is. And I'm very much looking forward to having it open. I have a problem with arthritis in my hands, and I learned on a recent trip to California that there were bombs that contained cannabis that gave me a great deal of relief. And I'm looking forward to being able to buy it in my own home rather than having to travel a significant distance to get to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Zachary Pendergast from 2410 Beacon Avenue. I am a full-time firefighter, and I'm Cindy's son. I'm also a stakeholder in the family business, Happy Buddha. Like 75% of your business community who supports cannabis on Beacon, I support cannabis on Beacon. So I'm asking for your recommendation to the LCRB as well. Thank you for your time and all of your consideration so far.
Thank you. Good evening.
I'm Joanne, and I'm not here about cannabis. I think I'm the only one.
That's okay.
Here to talk about the Rise development on Fifth Avenue. I know it's been through a process, and we appreciate the process it's gone to, and the changes that have been made are an improvement. However, the fundamental issue of the extraordinary height because of the flood level construction and the rooftop structures doesn't change the neighborhood's concerns about the height of the building and how it's going to be so imposing on those that live behind it. So just asking that you can still consider any amendments to the height, as well as what you can do for the future to make sure no buildings like this are built in our neighborhood in the future.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Sydney Greener. That's Sydney from Sydney. I'm at 2011 Linda Place. And I'm a mild cannabis user. I'm very active in sports. It helps me with my stress and my aches and pains and also my sleeping. I recently bought a bottle of CBD in Victoria, and it certainly helps me. I would urge you to support this application here. I'd far rather support a business in Sydney than Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, mayors and councillors. My name is Willie Dunford, and I live in Central Saanich at 1886 Mount Newton Crossroad. I work in Sydney, and I own 3 condos in Sydney, so I support Sydney. Oh, I forgot my glasses. That's not much good. Sorry about that. I don't think I'm younger than I am. It is hard to understand why a successful business-minded couple would take a risk and choose to start a medicinal, non-medicinal cannabis shop in Sydney. In 2001, the median age in Sydney was 50.7 years old versus the 38.4 years old in the rest of BC. Do they believe there are enough pot-smoking seniors in Sydney to support their business? After Sydney approved cannabis retail for Beacon Avenue, they proceeded in good faith. As required by their license, they secured a shop did leasehold improvements, and they're ready to proceed. Cannabis is not a black demon producing junkie drug users. Cannabis has been around for many years. In 2736 BC, it was used for gout, malaria, lack of appetite, constipation, and poor memory. After 95 years of prohibition, Canada has now legalized cannabis in the form of edibles, oils, and in the form of bud. I enjoy my glass of wine, while others enjoy their recreational marijuana. It is used by many to relieve arthritic pain, nausea from chemotherapy, sleep disorders, and many other ailments. Progressive doctors are prescribing marijuana versus all the chemical alternatives. This is a very heavily taxed and regulated business. For the privacy of buyers, the licensing branch requires an opaque window. Sydney requires a clear and interesting window. This is what is referred to as a rock and a hard place. After Sydney's approval for Beacon Avenue, they now want to send them to the back streets. Why would a business person opt to start a new business on the back streets of Sydney when there are so many shops empty on Beacon Avenue? Let these two willing and creative business owners come up with a solution that Sydney can live with. Imagine an interactive window map or a creative wall garden. Let them work with Sydney to make it even a better Beacon Avenue, a better place to live, and a greater tourist location. This is about a progressive Sydney. After an already large investment, this couple needs to have approval and be able to move ahead. The public has the right to be able to shop for this legal product. Sydney needs more business owners willing to take a chance in this unique demographic area. If the business model fails, it is their loss. They need your support to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor and Councillor, my name is Bill Collins. I live at 2028 Westbrook Drive. Firstly, I would like to thank the council and the staff for allowing Peninsula Streams into our neighbourhood on last Saturday, cleaning up that nasty invasive species called ivy. It was great, and there was even councillors out with the pruning shears. It was fantastic to see, and thank you to council and thank you staff and Peninsula Streams. I'm here tonight to talk about Beacon Avenue, and I understand the discussion around cannabis and retail on Beacon Avenue. As somebody that's passionate about the revitalization of our main street, it's extremely important that we go at it with open eyes. I was always of the adage, if you can't get it in Sydney, you don't need it. Clearly, that may be faltering, but somehow I think we have to overcome it. Sometimes decisions take a little bit of uncomfortableness, but that's what progress is. You have to be a little bit uncomfortable with the future. We have a right, we have a privilege, we have an ability to deliver something that's new to our community. It's frankly new everywhere in Canada, as most people know. But I think it's really important that we look at Sydney with an open mind, because we want to entice new people here. I want to bring a new business to Sydney. I'm planning on doing that. But if I'm planning to staff up, I need to tell my employees that this is a place you can come and meet most of your needs on a daily basis. So I urge council to think a little bit beyond the mainstream today and to look at what we want our community to look like in the future and make the decision based on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Councillor. Dennis Yellen at 2545 Oakville. I'd like to speak briefly to two issues tonight. The first is the issue of the cannabis store, and the second one is the beach access on Albay Road. On the cannabis side, last week the Committee of the Whole denied an application to open a retail cannabis operation on Beacon Avenue. The committee also directed staff to prepare a bylaw amendment that would ban cannabis retail on Beacon. The decision represents a complete reversal of the policy decision taken in August to allow cannabis retail on Beacon. That decision was taken following a public hearing and consultation with stakeholders like the SBIA and the Vancouver Island Health Authority. And I understand it resulted in some letters, but it didn't, in my mind, generate much debate or reaction at that point. Based on the August decision, the applicant followed the rules and acted in good faith. And according to Friday's article in the P&R, they made a number of investments. They looked to find the location. They applied to the Liquor and Cannabis Regulatory Board, and they paid all the required fees. They're now being told that their application is being denied because of conflict between the Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch requirements and that cannabis store windows be opaque, and the town's development guidelines that call for a visually interesting storefront display that supports Sydney's retail-focused downtown. During discussion at the Committee of the Whole, there was also some expression that the application would set a precedent, and it was also proposed shortly that cannabis stores could be allowed on Beacon if they were set back 15 meters. That option wasn't pursued. It's to be noted that other businesses on Beacon have opaque storefronts, and this was alluded to earlier. Real estate offices, and banks, insurance companies, the TELUS building, the most unattractive building on the street, I think, and notably Home Hardware. The changing rules in the middle of the game, to me, seems to be unfair. It sends a message that the town is not operating in a business-like way. This is a legal product, it's highly regulated, it's a legitimate business, and I think it'd be better to have a thriving business in Beacon than another empty store. Moreover, to my mind, guidelines are just that. They are guidelines. They're not embedded in stone, and I would assume that may allow some flexibility in their implementation. One option would be to allow this application to proceed as planned, including the opaque window covering. The LCRB might at some point provide greater flexibility, and we've heard this evening that might be possible. And at that time, the store could take steps to conform to the town's guidelines if it would fit. The town can then proceed with a bylaw if it wished to a bylaw amendment that would ban any new applications for cannabis retail outlets either in Beacon or in town. I think it would be fair and transparent and would be the best way to go. That's that issue. The second one is the issue of the beach access on Elbay Road. This application seeks to approve retroactively construction of 2 sets of beach stairs and the alteration of the existing set of beach stairs located at the address on Elbay Road 10379, 10383, and 10387. The landscape plan for this development did not include any mention of stairs to the beach. At the October 22nd Committee of the Whole, the committee agreed to proceed with option 3 to legalize the construction and alteration of these stairs subject to a forfeiture of a $10,000 portion of the landscape deposit to go towards environmentally enhancement in the Roberts Bay environmentally sensitive area. This is an experienced builder in my mind who should have known the rules. As well, he's under no obligation to pay the money as the landscape deposit is refunded if the builder has fully implemented the landscape plan. I think this is the wrong approach. I would recommend that the variance be denied and the applicant be directed to remove the stairs and restore the land. The applicant can always apply for a minor development permit to construct stairs that conform to our guidelines for construction in sensitive coastal areas. Concern was expressed during last week's discussion that taking this approach would result in disturbing the soil 3 times. But I wonder how much additional damage would be caused by removing the non-conforming stairs and installing more appropriate stairs. Turning a blind eye creates a precedent. It sends a message that builders can do what they want and then ask for forgiveness, and $10,000 is merely a slap on the wrist. In this regard, it's interesting to note that one of the houses, 10379 on Elbay Road, is now on the market for $1,910,560. I don't know if the 2 other houses have been listed. I couldn't find listings. One might wonder to what extent having a beach access affected the asking price of this home. This is too important an issue, and the town should take a stand. Going forward, the town might wish to look into strengthening its policy framework to give more flexibility to respond when situations like this occur. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Council. Detective Sergeant Harold McNeil, 2 L's. Just here as an interloper, and not to do with the marijuana store, but to do with a character reference for the couple. For 10 years, I've known this couple here and the business they've running, And if they walked through my door tomorrow and wanted to open a business, I'd welcome them with open arms. They have helped my son, who's 47 years old, learning disabled, and they have the Bell store there. They keep his equipment running, they keep him mobile, and I can only pass along everything for them. They're very, very good people. They'll be an asset to Sydney. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Evening. My name is Terry Hall, and this is my son Levi, and we're part of the Coalition Against the Height of the Rise development on Lochside. From my understanding, it's going to go through because of legalities and laws, and everybody's kind of too afraid to change the laws, or maybe people aren't allowed to change the laws. But yeah, because I'm just here tonight to say how disappointed I am that it's going to be built and it's not going to be in the same sort of height as was planned like maybe 10 years ago. It just seems ridiculous. And so I didn't prepare a speech or anything, but I just had to come out here tonight and say, it's basically, I want to get on record that I told you so when this thing gets built and it stands 2 stories above the Blue Waters and 4 stories above all of our houses. It's just going to be a little bit ridiculous. I don't really care that I'm going to be living in a construction zone for 2 years. Like my kids, they'll go watch it and they'll have fun, like whatever. But yeah, it's weird to me. And the fact that this can get passed and you can build something so ridiculously high that shouldn't actually be allowed, isn't really legal, but because of all the variations in the laws over the last 10 years, it's slowly come to fruition and is being approved. I don't know, common sense says no, but because of all the rules and regulations, it's gonna pass. So I just wanted to say it's not cool.
Thank you. I'll call for a second time. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Rory Lambert, and I live at Unit 1, 10046 5th Street. And despite my appearance, I'm not actually a user of marijuana. I have tried it on occasion. It does not work for me. I get extremely paranoid. But I do have friends and family members who it's their only medical option for true pain relief. So from a medical standpoint, I think I support fully a business on Beacon Avenue that sells marijuana to our citizens for medical reasons or for recreational reasons if they so choose. I do not care. But I also think that having it on Beacon is actually a positive sign. Because if you place something hidden away in a back street, in a cupboard somewhere, and someone discovers it, it becomes intriguing and interesting. You've hidden it. That's human psychology. But if you place it front and center, and you see all citizens of all stripes and types going into this store, and you walk past it with your children, and you explain to them what this store sells and how it is used, it is normal. It becomes a regular part of the fabric of the community in a very positive sense. But if you hide something behind walls or behind shrouds, it creates a mystery, an aura that it doesn't need. And I have to say, if we're going to start hiding medical things from people, we might have to ask our grocery stores to move off Beacon too, because I believe they have pharmacies. Pharmacies are not hidden, and they sell far more destructive substances that could be abused. So I fully support a public use of that space on Beacon Avenue, because I actually think it's a positive step for our community to make it a normal, average aspect of human interaction, and I think that's good. And I can't wait to show my son, who's 1 year old, when he's 12 or 13 or probably 7 or 8, and ask me, oh, what's that store? It's like, oh, that's whatever the store's name is at that point. And you know what? They sell medical and recreational supplies. That's a totally normal thing. And it'll probably be the only question I have about it. But if there's some small, dingy door 3 blocks back or 4 blocks back, and there's, it's all hidden away, he might always question me about it for weeks or months. So I say, on Beacon, out in front, for the positive good of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dale Hazelhurst, Resthaven Drive. We've talked about everything about the product that's being sold here. Let's give that some thought. In order for these businesses to survive, they need new customers. New customers mean people smoking dope. Now, that's generally recognized as a segue to other things. I'll tell you about a segue of marijuana. Let's start with marijuana. I'll talk about my niece. It's a very personal thing. My brother told me she started with marijuana, pakalolo. Remember, I've been in Hawaii for the last 50 years. Pakalolo is the local word for marijuana. It means crazy weed. She started with that. By the time she was in her 20s, she segued into other products. Those products killed her. She OD'd one night in December in Omaha, Nebraska. Her boyfriend abandoned her in the front seat of the car. If she didn't die of the overdose, she'd have froze to death. Think about the product you're marketing. This is the same product that ends up in vaping devices. It doesn't end well when people do that. This is the same product that ends up in brownies and cookies. In Colorado, it sent over 50 kids, infants, well, not infants, kids, to emergency rooms. Then they legalized it, and that number was exponentially greater. If people want marijuana, they can get it. They don't need to see it shining in bright lights on Beacon Avenue. So I would firmly object to this being on Beacon Avenue. Think of what those people need to survive, new customers. Do you want to be part of that? We don't need to be enabling new customers for this product. I don't mind people smoking dope at home, doing their own thing with it. That's fine. But remember the new customer. Big Tobacco, once upon a time, not all that long ago, said, smoking's good for you. There's no scientific proof that it's harmful. Well, we know how that turned out. And we know science right now is collecting all the dots that say, yeah, marijuana may not be good. Psychosis, paranoia, yeah. Let's give that some consideration. What are we willing to risk in the town of Sydney that we don't need to risk? Give that some thought. And remember that niece. She segued from marijuana to something else. So please give that some thought. Think about that high school kid that says, oh, I'm going to try this. It's cool. Bright lights on Beacon Avenue right there. Think about that. Now, maybe he can't afford marijuana from that store. But you know what? If business is good here, I don't know any reason why the black market guy can't show up too. He's got more than just marijuana. He's got other things too. So think about that when you make your decision here. I know the monkey's out of the cage, so to speak. It's going to go somewhere. But Beacon Avenue, give it the bright lights. Everybody can see it. It's a wonderful thing. It must be good for you. Well, give that some thought, because it's not necessarily so. And give science some time to connect all the dots and put it together and decide, hey, this isn't so good. This is not a health benefit for us. Please give that some thought. I understand these people did everything they should be doing, and I applaud them for that, but consider what they're marketing. We have a vaping shop in Sydney now, too. Anyways, I have nothing else to say. I think you got the feeling for how I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi, Wayne McNevin. I live at 2326 on Orchard Avenue, and I speak in favor of having Happy Buddha on Beacon Street. I think the man who spoke with the beard said it better than I could say it. And I also been to Victoria and seen trees where they have a live wall, and it is beautiful. And if that's something that they're considering putting in a window, I think it would be quite a nice looking window. I think, like people said, we can go in drugstores on Beacon, we can buy alcohol at the supermarket now. So I think if we send a message to new businesses that they can't open a business on Beacon, I don't think that's a wise choice. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll call for a third time if there's anyone wishing to address council this evening.
David Calverley, 9655 First Street. Having written a letter, I wasn't intending to speak this evening, and I feel as though I should, and with all due respect to a prior speaker, I have the same sorts of concerns about transference that he does, but one of the thoughts that I had came from that figure which came from the chiefs of police across Canada, that only 29% of marijuana sales are done through legal operations. I think that's a terrible thing, because that means that 71% are black market. Those are the people who are likely to push the illegal drugs. As for this being around for a while, I can remember learning about marijuana when I first went to university in 1968. I got a lecture in chemical engineering which explained that this was a fat-soluble substance rather than a water-soluble substance. It didn't appeal to me. I've actually never tried it. I had alcohol. God knows the things that people have done in the name of alcohol. I had cigarettes. They didn't work out too well either. I mean, this idea of Beacon Avenue, it's going to happen, guys. And if I think back to the same time period, I couldn't buy condoms except over the counter from a pharmacist, because the thinking at that time was, wow, we're going to let teenagers who aren't married have condoms. I wasn't supposed to meet homosexuals at the time either. But today we're a lot more enlightened. It's taken time, and we actually have a really nice rainbow crosswalk in town. Things will change, people. It will happen. But I haven't heard since 1968 of the kind of problems that we've had with alcohol, with vaping. And if I really wanted to find marijuana today, other than going to a regular store, I'd probably start at the schools. The kids know about it. It's been around, folks. It's not gonna lead them down the wrong path. But drug dealers will. The cops are not wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, I will call public participation to a close. We now have a presentation from Sharon Stoneman, President of Sydney Sisters Cities Association, on the recent NIMI visit. Sharon, good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sharon Stoneman. I am president of the Sydney Sister Cities Association. Thank you, Mayor McNeil Smith and the council for this opportunity to share with you the story of our recent visit by a delegation from Sydney's sister city of Nimi, Japan. Before I get into the trip, a little more detail, some context. Our sister city of Nimi is located in the Okayama Prefecture of Japan. Nimi City, it's just about where the A in Hiroshima is, beside the red tag. Nimi City has a population of about 30,000 people and covers 793 square kilometers. The city was recorded during the Heian Dynasty, which is the years 794 to 1185 of the Common Era, so there's been a town called Nimi there for a very long time. Most recently, Nimi City absorbed 4 smaller towns in 2005 to reach its current geographical footprint. Nimi is built along the banks of the Takahashi River in a mountainous region. It's not as mountainous as Sapporo or Nagano, the Olympic sites, but they do get snow. They have a ski hill. It is known for its limestone and cement production, and they are famous for their Wagyu beef, as well as grapes, tea, and sturgeon caviar. Nimi and Sydney became sister cities in 2008. Over the years, there have been visits between the two cities. I have counted 4 official visits, a student visit, a citizen delegation, and several private visits between the two municipalities. This visit this month is the 2nd visit of students, the last group we hosted in 2012. So what did we do with them? We had a very full program planned, but the first thing on Friday night was to get them to the Shoal Center where they could meet their host families and then head off for some much needed rest after 2 days of traveling. Here, Bob McClure, head of our NIMI committee, is handing out
gift bag orientation packages to our visitors. We had arranged for 5 host families, most of whom were located on the Saanich Peninsula. The students had an opportunity to stay in Canadian homes, meet family members, and experience, if briefly, our lifestyle. The adult escorts stayed at the Cedarwood Motel in Sydney, where they could appreciate the views across the beach. Mother Nature arranged some spectacular morning sunrises between the rain showers for them. The group of students had 6 young women and 4 young men ranging in age from 13 to 17. Accompanying them were Mr. Niro Kida, Superintendent of Education, the Nimi Board of Education, Mrs. Yumi Tanabe, Supervisor, Nimi City Board of Education, and Mrs. Mika Yokomi, Vice Principal, Nimi Mikami Junior High School. Mrs. Tanabe and Mrs. Yokomi spoke English. The others of the group had a range of ability. All of them understood much more English than we did Japanese. I would like now to introduce you to Ms. Saruri Kisoda. Ms. Kisoda is formerly of Nimi City, now resident in Victoria. We of Sister Cities owe her a huge debt of gratitude, as she acted as our translator during the visit. We would have been lost in a sea of incomprehension without her. First up was the BC Aviation Museum, who provided guides for the group, and they had a chance to explore the facility and to try all the things. And perhaps we may have some budding pilots, so they took right to it. Kenny Podmore and his consort Rhonda joined us at the Victoria Flying Club. And Kenny and Rhonda greeted the group. Kenny also performed a cry for the assembled group and welcomed everyone to our party. After the potluck dinner, the students made a presentation about their city. They followed up their presentation with songs, including Paprika, the song for next year's Summer Olympics in Tokyo. We can expect to hear this song a lot. Now you may wonder what is on their heads. It is a representation of the Nimi City mascot. Most municipalities, government agencies, and corporations in Japan have mascots, sort of like our Sydney seagull, but kind of cuter. This is Nimin, the mascot of Nimi City. Nimin takes the form of a bull representing the beef for which the region is famous, but is the purple color of the local Pioneers grapes. You'll notice that Nimin has found a home away from home in the display case outside the council chamber if you want a closer look. The Sister Cities Association received a gift of a beautiful hagoita. Once upon a time, these were paddles for playing a game, something like badminton. They became gorgeously decorated ritual and decorative objects over time. The town of Sydney also has one. It is in the display case outside the Chamber Council as well. The Shaw Centre of the Salish Sea hosted the students on Sunday morning, allowing them to learn about our local waters. And while the discussion is always interesting, the hands-on part is extra interesting. After having learned about the Salish Sea, it was on to an activity that the students specifically requested, skating at Panorama Recreation Centre. Nimi does not have a public skating rink, so this was a new experience for them. There was the initial getting the hang of it, then using the boards for help, some of this, but eventually they were off. In the end, a good time was had by all, and nothing and no one got broken. Mr. Kida even had a chance to watch a bit of the hockey game in the next arena. There was some shopping in Sydney and some time on the beach, and that was the weekend. On Monday and Tuesday, the students spent the morning at Parkland School. Through the international program, they were each paired up with a Japanese student buddy, and off to class they went. It was very interesting to see how Parkland and the Parkland International Program operate. We are very grateful to them for giving these students the opportunity to see what a Canadian high school is like. On Monday afternoon, the group was welcomed to Sydney Town Hall by Mayor McNeil Smith. Mayor McNeil Smith welcomed the delegation to Sydney. There was an exchange of gifts, hence Neiman. The students were also presented with gifts, and there was a chance to socialize after the speeches. Mr. David Bing, Honorary Consul General of Japan, also joined us and welcomed the students. We have many thanks to Mayor McNeil Smith for inviting us to Town Hall and to Councillor Sarah Duncan for joining us. Thanks also to Paula Cully, who made all the arrangements for us. On Tuesday, we ventured out from Sydney and headed into Victoria. We had a chance to view the legislature. Our guide had all kinds of interesting information, and the kids actually appeared to be interested. And they were able to make comparisons between the government of Canada, of British Columbia, and of that of Japan. Shopping on Government Street was very popular. They also hit Sydney pretty hard. The dollar store, the bookstore, two of the grocery stores, Splash. They went home. You couldn't believe how much their suitcases weighed. Before they left Japan, we asked for a picture of them, and with a little technology, and the folks at the Save On Foods Bakery produced the cake that was the center of our farewell dinner. They're looking much more serious than they did once we got our hands on them. Our host families joined us for a farewell dinner at the Bistro on Bevan, where there were more speeches, songs, and of course the infamous cake. Now, this tree was planted in 2008 to mark the signing of the Sister Cities Agreement between the town of Sydney and the city of Nimi. It has grown tremendously in 11 years. Whenever we have visitors from Nimi, we make sure that they see this enduring symbol of the relationship between the two municipalities. The Sister Cities Association was very happy to have hosted this group of students and their escorts. It was a big project and took a large team to make it happen. We are very happy and relieved that all went as planned. We would like to thank the town of Sydney, the mayor, council, and staff for their assistance in organizing and executing this project. The Sydney Sister Cities Association has the responsibility of managing the relationship with Sydney's 3 sister cities. Modern technology has meant that some aspects of this relationship is made easier, but it is visits like this that create relationships and strengthen the bonds between far-flung communities. Thank you for the opportunity to do this on behalf of our town. Thank you.
Sharon Stolman, I just want to say hats off to yourself as a volunteer and your colleagues on Sydney Sister Cities. It was remarkable to see. And I only experienced the exchange we had here in the council chambers. But it's remarkable that the volunteers can put so much time and effort to welcome a group of students. They were, I think, 8 to 13 or 8 to 14, and give them the tremendous experience to see our community and its many facets, and take that experience away at a young age, which will help them. And it really opened my eyes to the value of our sister cities relationships around the world. So thank you for that, and thank you for the presentation this evening.
Thank you very much.
We'll now move to approval of the agenda, and we do have 3 changes, which I'll refer to. We have item 11B, which was a staff recommendation regarding remediation action on a residence on Collinwood, and we are withdrawing that from the agenda this evening based on a staff recommendation on new information. And second, we have the addition of several letters of correspondence regarding the cannabis retail application on Beacon Avenue. And third, we have a letter from the proponent, Dan Robbins, with regards to the All Bay Road item on our agenda this evening. So if I could look for a motion.
Move adoption as amended.
Second. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. I don't have a mayor's report this evening, but we do have 3 councillor reports. Sorry.
Adoption of minutes.
Oh, jeez. I checked the wrong thing. Sorry. So item 3, we do have the adoption of our minutes from the regular council meeting of October 15th.
That the minutes be adopted.
Second.
Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move down to item 9, council reports. We have 3 council reports, first from Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Fallett, then Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief report. I'm a liaison with Sydney Museum and Archive Society, and just wanted to mention that the Sydney Museum and Archive Artifact Society recently won the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce Crystal Award for Excellence for not-for-profit organizations. And I would just like to pass along my congratulations to the staff, board, and all of the volunteers for this well-deserved recognition. They're a great organization in our community, and it's awesome to see that they got recognized for that. The Chief Dan George exhibit, many would know, started from June 21st and went till September 30th. It was extremely successful. They calculated that 2,703 people went through to see it. There were tours offered every Friday, and apparently that went over really well with some academics in the surrounding area, and they thought it was done professionally, and they got some great accolades. So that bodes well for any kind of future traveling exhibits that they want to bring to the community, which they're trying to do. And the third thing is there currently is a Wasayanich art exhibit which runs until November 28th. Many of the pieces of art are for sale, with 100% of the proceeds going to the artists. Some of the artists that have pieces there are Virgil Sampson, Doug LaFortune, and an up-and-coming artist named Sarah Jim. I've been through, and I'd highly recommend anybody to go through there. Some beautiful pieces of work, and it's well worth your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Start off with this past Saturday, Peninsula Streams, as we heard from a member of the public, Peninsula Streams hosted a Ray Creek ivy cleanup work party, and I would say there was probably well over 15, close to 20 volunteers that showed up for that, and we learned that there are some tricks to pulling ivy off the tree trunks and away from the base. You don't want to yank it and pull off the top of the tree in case there's a dead branch. And the other part was that ivy in trees makes for great rat's nests. So if you ever thought that ivy in trees is wonderful, you might want to rethink that. But anyhow, we did quite a bit of removal of ivy. It was kind of fun because we learned how to roll it like you would roll up a carpet, as we got this great big roll that was probably 20 plus feet long, and then we rolled it up into a ball. So it felt pretty good after the end of a 3-hour work party to do some work there in Ray Creek. So if you're coming through Ray Creek and off of Frost Avenue and you notice that the ground looks pretty neat, there were some volunteers who made that happen. So that was fun. Then also the past weekend, October 18th to 20th, was the 17th Sydney Fine Art Show and Sale at Mary Winspear. And thank you, Denny Jelena, for the work that you did with organizing that. It was a great show. I understand that there was over 1,100 pieces of art. We also had, I think, an increase in visitors to the show over the previous years. There's an incredible amount of talent that is showcased here in the Peninsula. They're not artists from just the Peninsula or the Sydney area. They come from all over the place, but I think it speaks well for our particular Sydney Fine Art Show that we're getting these works coming to our show. It's a juried art show, so I would highly recommend it to put on your calendar for next year. So I just want to congratulate the organizers and the volunteers, the artists, and obviously also those who came to view and purchase. All deserve to be congratulated. And then finally, this last Saturday and Sunday was the Sydney Artsy Studio Tour on the Peninsula, and they've been going for 25 years now, which is pretty awesome. We're 26 artists that showcased their works. Some were in their home studios, others were at Talista Art Gallery and down in Abbeyfield. So I spoke with a couple of the artists who said it was a great turnout. The weather definitely helped, and they do some sales. And it's not just about going in and purchasing, it's also being able to see the artists in their own studios and how they create their work. And seeing what their motivation is. And you get to see some nice houses as well. I walked through one house way up on, someplace up in, off of Land's End. And she said, just keep walking around from room to room. She says, you can walk in the bedrooms and look at the art. And it was kind of like enjoying the view and enjoying the artwork as well. So that's something, there's a spring show and the fall show, and I highly recommend it. So that was my last couple of weekends, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last week I attended the Chamber of Commerce Crystal Awards on behalf of the town and was pleased to see a number of Sydney businesses get awards. And so I just wanted to mention those. Councillor Garnett has already mentioned the museum, which won in the nonprofit category. All Care Canada won for contribution to the community. Bayside Diesel and Marine won for outstanding customer service. Cut Cartel Barbers won for best new business. Peninsula Streams was honored as Newsmaker of the Year for their significant and ongoing involvement in the community. And Sydney Museum, as I mentioned. Also last week was Small Business Week in BC, which focuses on recognizing small businesses, which are important drivers to our economy. And I sat in on a webinar hosted by the Ministry of Jobs, Trade and Technology. And it was about how local government can support business in their community. One of the things that was mentioned on there was a presentation on something called Open for Business Awards. And what it is, it's an annual award where they recognize and celebrate local governments that have done things to cultivate a business-friendly culture that allows businesses to flourish in their community. They talked about 7 best practices that they look at when they're making this award. I won't go into all 7 of those, but it occurred to me that this is something that we might want to look at as a community in terms of striving towards, you know, being eligible for an Open for Business Award. So I'll perhaps send that information along to our new Economic Development Advisory group for their consideration and to see if they think there's some merit in that. One of the things that I will highlight out of those 7 best practices is the idea that local governments can do more to support businesses by recognizing them and acknowledging their contribution to the community. And so when I thought of that, and when I was thinking of our local Sydney businesses that were recognized last year by the Chamber, I thought it would be nice for us as council to perhaps send a congratulatory letter to those businesses who received awards last year, just as to let them know that we know that they were honored and that we appreciate their business as well. So I know it's not normal to make motions as part of a councillor's report, but I would move with council's permission that we prepare and send a letter of congratulations from mayor and council to those businesses to thank them, to congratulate them, and to thank them for the important role they play in contributing to our economy.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in, Councillor Garnier.
Just a thought, should we maybe also recognize the ones that were nominated but didn't win, just because their names are put forward? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like then, you know, just because they didn't win doesn't mean maybe they were just this much less, you know, they had a successful year as well. Just
I would support sending letters of congratulations to the winners and those who were nominated. It's not a really long list. It might add another maybe 4 businesses to the list.
I'm happy to see that amount.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And you're all good? Thank you, Councillor. We'll move to item 10, our committee reports. So we have a Committee of the Whole meeting from October 22nd and a number of recommendations. Councillor Follett.
I'll move recommendation to receive the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
There were several recommendations that came from that meeting. First recommendation is smoking in downtown Sydney, that staff be directed to require that event organizers who are requesting to close Beacon Avenue to traffic make their event smoke and vape free.
Second.
Discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Second recommendation from committee, and I so move that staff be directed to further investigate the steps to declare Sydney's downtown core smoke and vape free.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So I'm still not in favor of this. I guess my concerns are that you know, to make the whole downtown core smoke and vape free, I'm concerned about perhaps unintended consequences. You know, talked about, you know, people that work in the downtown core that smoke and how is it going to impact them. I don't know if that's going to be a factor or not. But also, I don't know that it's going to have a significant amount of impact on what we're wanting to do. So for those reasons, I still oppose to the motion.
Thank you. I have a question through to staff. Sorry, I haven't asked it before now. But with the second recommendation to further investigate, and appreciate that this is an investigation, not to pursue the steps, Does staff have a rough time frame when they might be able to come back to council with that? I appreciate if it's the new year. I just don't really know what time frame staff is considering.
Yeah, I would say it's going to be probably at least a month, Mr. Mayor, or perhaps even early in the new year. But we'll look at our resources and capacity. But I would say at least a month.
Okay, thank you. The reason for the question is recommendation 3 is for staff to bring forward a 2020 budget item, researching appropriate locations to install cigarette butt disposal containers, and we might not wish to pursue that if, in fact, we were going to a smoke-free downtown, but based on the timing that staff is suggesting, I think my questions have been answered. Thank you. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support my colleague on this one, that I don't think this is going to be a good use of our staff's time. And when we're having the discussion at Committee of the Whole, one of the major concerns was about cigarette butts on the street. And there was a lot of discussion about, sending a message and people self-policing and that sort of thing. And littering of cigarette butts is illegal. And we've done quite a lot to publicize that over the years. We have a policy about enforcing that. And obviously, self-policing really isn't being effective. And it's exactly the same people that you're expecting are going to self-police on a smoking ban. I mean, it is the smokers that are littering the cigarette butts. So if that isn't working, why would we think that declaring the downtown smoke and vape free is going to work any better? And it just seems to me that probably there are a lot of better things we could have staff doing. So I'm not going to support this one.
Thank you. Councillor Rantula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And while I certainly follow that logic with respect to cigarette butts and where they come from and whether or not they continue to appear, I think it's a healthy dialogue, and it was certainly a recommendation that came before council. I think it's an interesting discussion to have, to hear from the community with regards to that, and ultimately, despite the fact that the letter writer was referring to litter essentially and cigarette butts on the streets, another component that came up in the discussion was just that aspect of a smoke and vape free environment to create for the retail experience in the community. And so I'd like to see what feedback is, and I like the fact that it highlights the shopping experience in Sydney one way or another through this discussion. So I'm still comfortable to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. If I might speak for a moment, I support all the words of Councillor Rantula, but in speaking to the question of whether or not it would make a difference, we currently have no smoking, vaping cannabis signs in virtually every ground floor retail location in downtown. It's a CRD bylaw to have that in place. And I believe that if you didn't have that signage in the downtown, you would have a lot more smoking downtown, and you would have a lot more smoking everywhere downtown. And so it is self-policing to a large degree. I can't recall the last time I saw a bylaw enforcement officer, but I can recall the last time a merchant spoke politely to a person smoking just outside the doorway, saying the smoke was coming in and pointing to the sign in their window. I can recall a nice little old lady speaking to a large young man, suggesting that he shouldn't be doing what he was doing in that location. And so self-policing does have its effects, and I believe the existing signage does. I don't think it's going to take a lot of signage. Quite frankly, I don't think it's going to take a lot of staff time to research this. What you're going to do in terms of it will become public. There's not going to have to be a large financial marketing campaign to make the public aware of this. When the public becomes aware of it, it will be self-policing throughout the downtown. And it won't be a case of whether you're measuring 7 meters from a doorway or not. You're halfway across the crosswalk and that's more than 7 meters. It's nowhere downtown. And I think it speaks to being a more healthy community. and for the reasons, some of the reasons that Councillor Rintoul mentioned, so I'll be supporting. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. Motion carries.
Third recommendation, and I shall move that staff be directed to bring forward a 2020 budget item to research appropriate locations and install cigarette butt disposal containers.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So I'm still not in favor of butt disposal containers for a number of reasons. First of all, the CRD recommends against this, and I presume the reason being, if you have them, they will smoke. You know, so people will assume if you have a butt container that it's a suitable location to smoke. So if we're going to go ahead and declare the whole downtown smoke-free, people shouldn't be smoking there. So why are we providing, it seems to be contradict what we're trying to do. If we have butt containers there, unless they're on the periphery, that once you get into this zone, you're not allowed to smoke. But if you're thinking of having butt containers along Beacon, it just seems to contradict what we're trying to do if you want to say Beacon is going to be smoke-free. There's also, of course, the additional costs and maintenance. I'd rather see staff spending up. You know, we get complaints about garbage bins on Beacon and in different parks that staff don't have the time to clean those up or to cut the grass on the other side of the highway. So it seems that staff are already taxed to do everything, so it just seems like another thing. And in the scheme of things and everything that we have to be done, I just don't think that this is a big priority.
Councillor Felt and Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I had voted in favor of it last week, and my thinking was that, yes, I agree with what my colleague was just saying in regards to if we're going to make a smoke-free environment, then we shouldn't have to, we shouldn't then put out butt containers. The idea was to clean up the street, to give people a place to put their butts if they are going to be smoking. But I think from a cost perspective, that probably is not our best way of looking at it. I think if we addressed it, that we encouraged our shop owners to take an extra measure of sweeping in front of their streets and cleaning that up, and I know the staff is on it and recognizes that if there has been an event that creates more walking traffic and there's more garbage, whether it's cigarette butts or whatever. So at this time, I think I'm not going to vote in favor of this particular motion this week. Thank you.
Councillor Duncan.
So last week I voted against recommendation 2 and for this recommendation, and for the same reasons that the people who are smoking tend to be the hourly wage earning class, I guess you would say. And people coming to our town to work, the people I see smoking are the employees on their breaks. I still don't see how we're going to have a downtown core that is smoke and vape free, and you're going to forbid employees from having a place to smoke, that they're not just going to go into the residential zone and stand on the corners and smoke there. I hope that when the staff investigate this, they talk to many of the business owners, because they know it's hard enough to find employees. Telling the employees they now have to work their shift without having a smoke break is going to make it a little bit harder. And I also know people who quit flying and taking the ferries because they could no longer have a smoke on them. So when we keep talking about wanting to bring more footsteps into the downtown, and now you're going to tell them not only can you just not go, you know, like, okay, man, take your cigarette just over there, you're going to say you're not even allowed to come downtown and have a cigarette. I don't know what percentage of people still smoke who would be choosing to come to Sydney or not based on that criteria, but I do know that they exist. So for that reason, I feel that this recommendation and simply finding locations that are within, you know, the suitable CRD bylaw and just putting a device there and being able to say, like, look, man, you can go over there, would be more in keeping with what we can actually expect from human behavior that meets more people's needs than trying to do a blanket. But so at least pass this one, so when people inevitably still smoke and employees are storming out of their back room, we can tell them where to go.
Councillor Garnett.
Yeah, just to build a little bit on what Councillor Duncan was saying, it doesn't specifically speak to Beacon. It says research appropriate location. So I think if we make the downtown core non-smoking, you're going to be pushing smokers to the outer areas. So maybe, you know, that's the locations we're going to need these cigarette butt disposal containers. And I spoke before last when we discussed this the first time about potential fires from cigarettes being thrown on the ground, and this will now be closer to residential neighborhoods. So I think from a safety concern, I think it's even more important. So I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Any further comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you.
Fourth recommendation is development.
Just before you proceed,
Sorry.
I need to recuse myself from
Yes.
recommendation 4. I have a conflict with a family member who's a member of the team that's of the proponent. I'd ask Councillor Fallot to take my place. Thank you.
Fourth recommendation that came from Committee of the Whole is regarding development permit application number DP 100786 at 10129 5th Street to construct a 3-story, 71-unit multifamily residential development. Recommendation from committee, and I so move that the development permit application number DP 100786 at 10129 5th Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
So I'll vote in favor of the motion, but I feel compelled to make at least a couple comments just because of the comments we had in public participation and the frustration expressed by, you know, the residents for this.
That's the other development.
Okay, sorry. Disregard.
Okay, I'll ask for a second time. Any discussion at the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Can someone get the mayor back?
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah,
Thank you.
down the list, it's number 9.
Thank you, Councillor.
And fifth recommendation coming from Committee of the Whole is the new cannabis retail store license referral at 2410 Beacon Avenue. Recommendation from committee, and I so move that staff be directed to respond to the Liquor and Cannabis Licensing Branch regarding the Happy Buddha cannabis application at 2410 Beacon Avenue with a copy of the staff report dated October 15, 2019 related to the Happy Buddha cannabis application, and the following decision. 1, whereas it is the Council of the Town of Sydney's opinion that a proposed cannabis retail store shall meet to a high degree the standards and requirements established by the Town of Sydney Liquor and Cannabis Licensing Policy DV-015. 2, and whereas Policy DV-015 highlights the Town of Sydney's broader expectation that cannabis retail store locations will support the Town of Sydney's goals and policy objectives of creating and maintaining a pedestrian-friendly retail experience on Beacon Avenue that includes a variety of interesting and accessible window displays visible to the public. 3, and whereas the proposed Happy Buddha cannabis retail store's proposed storefront design does not provide a retail display or a level of visual interest that would address this expectation. And 4, therefore, based on the application not meeting the requirements of Policy DV-015, the Council of the Town of Sydney resolved that the application be denied.
A second.
Discussion. Councillor Fallot.
Thank you. This is not an easy decision. Well, sorry, the decision I feel is easy. It's not an easy process. There's a lot of passion was displayed once again this evening, and in no way is my decision based on the effort and the merits that the proponents have put into the store. And this is not about cannabis. This is about the the look of downtown Beacon Avenue and an active and vibrant storefront. And I appreciate wholeheartedly your efforts to create a green wall in the window. Unfortunately, what I see with that, it's still a static display. It is not an active display. The difference between, yes, somebody had mentioned that, you know, we've got banks, we've got real estate agents, we've got other stores that don't have these requirements. They come from an era, they were long there before we had changed the bylaw. Today, those same stores wouldn't have that opportunity. And I know when I visit other towns, if I'm going down a street that has blank or static window displays, I am not as apt to go down that road. I will go down the road that has something for me to look at that is changing. So on those merits, and it is not our decision, or it is not my decision to deny you for that, it's the Liquor Control Board that is setting the precedent of what your window has to look like. And we're saying we want an active window display. And unfortunately, what the Liquor Control Board is imposing on the product that you're selling is, in essence, tying our hands to that. And I can't, unfortunately, support your application. It has nothing to do with you as people. It has nothing whatsoever to do with cannabis. It has nothing to do with my morals about what I feel or my philosophy about cannabis or the people who use it. It's nothing whatsoever to do. It has to do with one comment that came out on public discussion was, what do we want our community to look like in the future? And that is active storefronts. And unfortunately, what you have to do to satisfy LCBC does not meet that. So I cannot support your application.
Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I made it clear at committee of the whole, I don't have any issue with cannabis retail on Beacon, but I'm not expecting I'm going to change people's minds on that. I've had plenty of experience in the previous term of having council decisions done in a manner that I didn't think was appropriate. The thing I want to talk about is fairness and process, and I think we have a serious issue here. So I do think that we are changing the rules in midstream, and personally I do not perceive that that is fair, and I do think that sends a message to the business community, but I'm not really going to dwell on that one. What's being proposed as the very next recommendation is to amend the zoning bylaw to prohibit retail cannabis on Beacon. And of course, we're open-minded going into a public hearing, and we've already seen in a short time, without a lot of publicity, that we can have a lot of people mobilized to say that they're of a differing view. So there is a possibility that when this zoning amendment that is being proposed goes forward, that they're going to show up in hordes with pitchforks and whatever, and at the end of the day, council may decide, we're not going to change the zoning bylaw, you can do it on Beacon. At that point, if you've already denied this application, it will be so grossly unfair, especially after the amount of money they've put in. So what I would suggest to you is, if you want to be reasonable about this, table the application until after you've approved the rezoning. Because if you don't approve that rezoning, like I say, it will be grossly unfair, and this will be a horrible process. And of course, you are open-minded about the possibility that that outcome could happen. So, you know, it just seems unreasonable to deny the application tonight. Table it. Deal with it after your zoning amendment. And in fact, my suggestion would be you advertise the application as well as advertising the proposed zoning amendment that would not allow it on Beacon. They go forward in parallel, you'll get comments on both, and if it goes one way, the zoning bylaw gets adopted. If it goes the other way, you've advertised for the application and you can move on with the application. I think that's a better process.
We have Councillor Rintoul first and Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I beg your pardon. To the applicants, to Mr. Stiles and Ms. Pendergraft, I think my position's been clear all along, and I certainly am respectful of what you've done and the efforts you've put into this, and to the process, and that council made a change, certainly in terms of the possible direction here around revisiting the zoning bylaw itself. I'm comfortable with the suggestion that Councillor Wainwright has made that we table this, in that you've got a personal interest in this. You've got some personal capital behind this undertaking. I don't want to be unfair. I should clarify again, and I'll have the opportunity under the next item to speak to Cannabis on Beacon, because my position there hasn't changed. But I also feel, and I noted at the time, that we didn't have a tremendous amount of feedback on this when the bylaw was introduced for public hearing. It was July, August. We had some pretty limited feedback, I feel, for the nature and the significance of this decision. So I'd be happy to see this item tabled in fairness to the applicants. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We have Councillor Duncan and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Wainwright's suggestion is probably the best we have from now. I know at committee of the whole, I flip-flopped saying, if it's going to be contentious, and we clearly, as council, misunderstood what we would be allowed to do to help them create, or have that active storefront. Maybe we should change the way it's on Beacon, and that I would have proposed that from the beginning, so that we didn't have to go through this active storefront discussion. It could be somewhere where being active didn't matter, as long as it had a Beacon address. But then, of course, I flip-flopped again, and listening to my colleagues, Councillor Garnett in particular, saying, what kind of message are we sending to businesses when we approve it, and then they go through all this, and then we yank it out from under their feet again? And even still, so now we would be then saying, well, let's table this and we'll take it back out to the community again. Well, these business owners, like, what hustle, what great business owners we have here. They went to the news, they put up signs in their storefront, they did way more advertising and got way more feedback on anything we've gotten in a long time. We got 85 emails and 81 of them were for it. Are we going to get different feedback when we take it out again to the community? We're going to get the same feedback in the same percentages. And now people are going to be even madder, because they're like, well, we did tell you. And we came and overwhelmingly spoke, for it. And we sent a whole bunch of emails and we were overwhelmingly for it. And they busted their butts trying to figure out how to do this at the last minute, and they talked to, it sounds like, other business owners, and their stats about the Chamber of Commerce business owners, 75% of them still being in favor of it. What last minute data and feedback do we think we're going to get from the community that is different from what the community has already told us if we put this out again? Because it sounds like, even though I know it is totally true, as Barbara said, we changed the policy before because people were worried, wow, we do have a lot of inactive storefronts on Beacon. This isn't going to be good if we keep letting this happen. We should change it so this doesn't happen. But it sounds like this storefront's pretty active, right? Like they put up a little sign in the front. They know how to do it. I'm feeling pretty confident that these people will figure out a way to make people happy with looking at their storefront. And the fact that they've come up with a living wall and it's still in development, and that's something that can change too. You can change plants. You could, at this point, I don't know what else what else we can hear from people to change our minds.
Okay, I'll go with Councillor O'Keefe, and then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I agree with Councillor Duncan that I don't think there's any point in tabling this or waiting for something else to happen. I think, to be fair to the proponent and the community, we need to, you know, move forward with this. My understanding, do we have any additional information from staff in regards to the active storefront?
Sir, are you specifically referring to the green wall?
Yes. Yep. In the presentation, the applicant indicated that they had received full approval from that their green wall would meet the. Is that correct, or do we know?
Right. So through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, we did receive an email from the LCRB this afternoon sometime that indicated they would give preliminary approval to the green wall concept pending further investigation into practicalities.
And did staff have any comment on whether that green storefront would meet the rules for the policy in terms of interactive storefront?
In that respect, no, it's unchanged. It's a static display. It's immediately behind the window. It's non-transparent, so you wouldn't be able to see. There'd be no sort of visual interaction between the interior of the store and the outside. So in staff's opinion, there is no real change there.
Okay. So I continue to be not in favor of the application for, you know, those reasons. But I think, you know, one thing I want to address is the idea that, you know, council is being unfair, or that they had completely approved something and now we're completely flipping. So I just want to recap a couple things that are informing my decision on this. And first of all, you know, in some of the correspondence we got, there was impression from the public that this is something that council had approved and that we had had said this was okay. These people went and invested thousands of dollars, and now, surprise, we've changed our mind. So what I recall from this process is that when we had a public hearing in August, the proponents came forward and announced that they were opening a cannabis store on Beacon, and we're moving forward with that. And at that time, the mayor, you know, interjected to say, hang on, no, just setting the rules straight here that we're considering this, but it's still the process that you have to go through a formal process to be approved. So there seemed to be a little bit of jumping the gun there. If doing their homework, they would have known that having opaque windows on Beacon would be an issue. And when council did pass the motion to allow cannabis on Beacon, that didn't mean that the applicant was going to automatically be approved. And so they would have known that it was still the process, that they had to come forward to council with an application before it could be fully considered. So in terms of, if I was a business person investing in a new venture like this, I would be hesitant to invest thousands of dollars until I had a concrete decision from the town that yes, I can move forward with this. And listening to the discussion, they would have heard the concerns that council had about active storefronts. And so it's unfortunate that they proceeded to move forward and spend thousands of dollars before knowing for sure that this would go forward. It sounds to me that it's still staff's opinion that what is proposed would still not meet the policy requirements for an active storefront. I'm not opposed to change in our community, like, as you know, some people have said, you know, we have to be open to trying new things, and that's fine. But I guess what I have concern about is this is something that you know, are we going to allow this for all businesses on Beacon? And I think, to be fair, we would have to, so that if we approve a storefront that doesn't meet the policy, that means we have to get rid of the policy. And I've concern about that, about the concern of vibrancy on our main retail street. So for that reason, I will not be approving the application.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Garnett, and then I'll speak, and that'll make the 7 of us for a first time, and then we'll go to Councillor Wainwright for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I recall, the other option other than denying was to send letters out to surrounding businesses and neighbors and posting it in the PNR a couple of times so we get more public feedback. There was some suggestion that we didn't need any more public feedback, and I always think we do need public impact and feedback on whatever we're talking about when it's a major change like this. This active storefront thing, and I know it's part of the zoning, it just confounds me because I always knew all along that what the regulations were because I read them, so I was not surprised by anything that came out after. But is an empty storefront better than an active than opaque storefront? Because we have empty storefronts in Sydney, and we talk about vibrancy as a strategic priority. We talk about economic vibrancy regularly on this council, and we're denying a potential business that can provide economic vibrancy in the community. And I do believe it will bring in business and help other businesses in our community. So some of the stuff I'm having a hard time with in my head because to me it makes no logical sense if we're going to talk about these things and then turn away a business that's gone through a lot of effort. And we did pass a bylaw 2.5 months ago that included Beacon Avenue. So we can talk about whether or not, I don't recall the same thing as you with the interjection of the mayor at that meeting. I don't remember that. And I don't know whether they secured the location before we passed that or not, but I'm assuming they didn't. And if they went along the process, and yes, you have a business plan, but you still need to secure a place before you can move forward, the thing is getting passed. Because what if somebody else moves in and you wanted that location? It's a risk you take if you don't, I guess. It's perplexing to me. I just don't see how we're going backwards and now saying that we're not going to have, because that's what we're proposing here in the next recommendation is to not have it at all on Beacon Avenue. So we've gone from saying it's going to be there, and 2.5 months later we're saying no, you can't. And these people are floating in the wind in the meantime, which I also agree with Councillor Wainwright is extremely unfair. And I'm not comfortable with denying a business. Small businesses, backbone of the country. People come with a business plan. We need businesses in Sydney. They'll bring employees. They'll bring all of it. It's all intertwined. And I think this sends a really bad message on many levels by denying it. So I will not vote for the recommendation to deny.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll start off my remarks by saying that there are strong opinions on both sides of this in our community. Apart from the individuals who have spoken this evening, and we appreciate the direct feedback by speaking, those letter writers, and also I've spoken to a number of individuals, a number of businesses and individuals have spoken to me on the street. And so I've been consistent in terms of what principles am I applying, and from the outset I said that I accept cannabis retail in downtown Sydney. But I've not supported this application. The lion's share of this application, the work on this application was done before we approved the zoning bylaw. And I don't think it's I don't think it's a case of being unfair to business. One of the reasons we changed the bylaw, amended the bylaw, or proposing to amend it, is that we had new information. We were under the understanding that it could be transparent and active to a degree, and upon confirmation from the Cannabis and Liquor Branch, we were properly informed that that's not the case. Has that created a hiccup over several weeks? It has, and that's unfortunate. I've been had a career in retail for 26 years. I was with a national retailer that had businesses in over 300 business districts and communities across the country. I do appreciate what the applicants have, and I had an independent business in town for more than one independent business in town for 18 years, and I do appreciate the work that's gone into your application and establishing a retail, wanting to establish a retail location. I want listeners today to visualize, if you will, and perhaps think about why businesses like Buddy's Toys, like Flush, like Island Blueprint, like Cotton and Blues, like Dancing Orchid, and I could go on and on a dozen or two times, are not on Bevan Avenue, are not on the side streets. They're active storefronts. And when shopping districts were first created in the 1960s in malls, I happen to live in Toronto and go to Yorkdale Mall when it opened in the 60s. It was to bring, shopping was to bring active storefronts, active businesses, so that you could see goods and services on offer. Why don't we see doctors' offices, dentists' offices, accountants' offices, lawyers' offices, architectural offices on Beacon Avenue? They're inactive. People make appointments to go to those. And business districts, downtown business districts that just have a single main street, don't have those businesses on their main street because they're inactive, and because businesses like Buddy's Toys and all those that I mentioned that have active storefronts don't wish to locate among inactive storefronts. It doesn't help their situation, and that's why you don't see it in other business districts, in malls, for example. And so our zoning bylaw number 2015 supports this goal by restricting certain types of non-retail uses, example offices, on the ground floor along Beacon Avenue in order to support an attractive retail shopping environment. That's not new. That's been in place for quite some time, certainly the 18 years that I've been here. The policy that we developed was proposed retail storefront must present an attractive face to the street by providing multiple points of visual interaction through doorways, clear windows, other pedestrian-oriented features that promote activity and transparency. A living green wall is not going to do that. We have 375 plus business licenses in downtown Sydney. Most of them are not on Beacon Avenue. You can go down the side streets, you can go down one side of Sydney Avenue, you can go down Bevan Avenue, and you will see a lot of businesses. And they can be successful there. They don't have to be on Beacon Avenue. They pay lower rents for being where they were. It's because they're destinations. And they don't have to have active storefronts. Dental hygiene clinics, insurance companies, the rest are inactive. Many of the businesses on the side streets and on Bevan are inactive storefronts. The medical clinic on Bevan Avenue that's expanding. Then almost that entire building is going to be in an active storefront. You don't want that on Beacon Avenue on your main shopping retail corridor. So again, I do appreciate the work that's gone into this. I don't think we're being inconsistent. I don't think we're being unfair, given that our decision was based on new information that came forward. And I will now go to speakers for a second time. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll just explain why I think we are being unfair. And I actually watched the video of that council meeting where we had the public hearing, so it's fresh in my mind what people actually said. So there was a staff recommendation about inactive storefronts, and staff were recommending against it that night. And it was something that was actually discussed at the council meeting. So the issue did come up, and the vote was 4-3 in favor of allowing it on Beacon. And the zoning bylaw got amended. So we had that discussion, we discussed this particular issue. Now, I concede that there was a difference in understanding because obviously members of council felt that that LCRB requirement was flexible. But I'm going to say the proponents did not encourage that misunderstanding. That was our misunderstanding. The new information that came forward was correcting our mistaken understanding. Now, they did obviously invest time and money in advance of that public hearing because they had to look into the regulations and understand what the business was going to be and all that kind of stuff. But the way the regulations work, you cannot apply for a license unless you've secured a location. So at the point that they put in that application, they were on the hook for locking in on some things that cost them money. So obviously, you know, the question of how much of the 40,000 that was mentioned earlier tonight was before the bylaw got adopted or not doesn't really matter, even if it's only 1,000. They spent money based on the decision that we made at that council meeting, and the new information is us coming to understand that we had made a mistake. And to me, the issue of unfairness is we made a mistake, we expect them to pay for it. They're the ones on the hook for the cost, okay? And we are changing the rules. We're changing the rules because we had a mistake in understanding. I understand we can change the rules, we're allowed to, and so forth. But to me, it is pretty clear that it's our mistake, we're expecting them to pay for it, and I don't think that's fair. An option that I think would be fair would be for us to say, okay, we made a mistake, we're going to process your application, but no more. We're fixing the mistake. There will not be any other ones. And I'd be okay with that. Like, to me, that is fair. But anyway, the question has come up whether we're being unfair. So I'm just explaining. Yes, I'm thinking we're unfair. That's why I think we're being unfair.
Thank you, Councillor. Now go to Councillor Fallett. Thank you. Did we have another, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just taking another run at it, I don't think we were unfair. To say that we made a mistake, I don't think is accurate. I don't feel like I had a mistaken understanding. There was other factors in my decision as well. Were not related to the active storefront, and I guess we haven't talked about that yet, but I'll throw it out there because I think it's important for people to understand, is that, you know, the thing that's different, people have said, well, there's no different than a liquor store or a tobacco store on Beacon. There's nothing different between cannabis and these other things. Well, there is, and cannabis is different, and it's different because the health authorities have told us that there is a risk to children being exposed to cannabis and that we should be limiting their exposure to the substance and to cannabis retail outlets. So we got that memo from Island Health, and that's the reason why the province has said that they have to have opaque windows. One of my big issues is that because Beacon Avenue is a major venue for many events frequented by families, we have our Christmas parade, our Canada Day celebrations, Treat Street, summer markets, the Torque Masters car show. I think we should be heeding what health authorities are telling us and not abdicating our role in mitigating the impact on children and youth. And what they have said in their recommendations is not only do they recommend that there be a buffer zone of 300 to 600 meters between schools, rec centers, and other locations that children and youth frequent, but we should give further consideration to reducing exposure along main transportation routes that children and youth would frequent. So for me, that was even a bigger issue and why I have consistently voted against this from the beginning, to have cannabis retail on Beacon. You know, the opaque windows is one thing, but to me, that was even a bigger impact. Getting back to the fairness again, I'll just reiterate that the applicant knew that they would not be approved finally until their application actually came forward. So I'm quite comfortable with the original decision that we made.
Do we have any other speakers for a second time? Councillor Garnett?
Yeah, since you brought up, Councillor O'Keefe, you brought up alcohol and tobacco, and I've said this before, and I'll say it till the end of time, there's been more harm caused by alcohol and tobacco than marijuana, and I'm sure the stats would back me up on that. The RCMP have had a look at all of this and didn't seem to have any issues with it. I mean, we allow kids to go into liquor stores. We have a cold beer and wine store right on Beacon Avenue. We have a tobacconist shop right on Beacon Avenue. They're promoting products that are equally, if not worse, for your health and overall effects and mental. And I think any health agency would also say that those have pretty drastic effects on children and would say they shouldn't be near them. But yet there they are. And then kids can walk by them every day, can walk in them. They can't go into a cannabis store. They can't. You have to be 19. That's a pretty stringent restriction. And there are the restrictions that they place on the cannabis shops are far more severe than any of these other places. I understand what you're saying about the active storefront to some degree. Personally, for me, that's not how I shop. I just go where I gotta go. Nothing lures me into a store. But I understand how that works for most people, especially tourists. You know, but I also see the benefit of having this store in town. People will not go to Victoria. They'll go to that store instead, and perhaps they'll visit those active storefronts on Sydney instead of visiting the active storefronts in Victoria, where they're now going to have to go to get their product. And the same for tourists. How much money are we going to lose in our economy because tourists who come here, oh, do we have a cannabis shop? Oh, no, they don't have one. Don't have one there nice and close, so maybe we'll go somewhere else. We'll go to Victoria where it's easier. And there's open and active storefront stores there too. They'll get our business. There's many people here that have mobility issues. Getting to that place is more difficult. Side streets. That's kind of where it sounds like we want this to go for some on council. All I think of when I think of that is dark alleys. I know it's not like that on our side streets, but it seems like we're pushing a legitimate substance that can be sold legally to the fringes again. And it has a stigma attached to it, and it's not supposed to anymore. We're supposed to be beyond that. We're supposed to be looking to the future and how we want to incorporate everybody in the community. And this doesn't do that. To me, it's making it feel like it's an isolated thing that has no value when it actually does. To many people, as we've heard speak tonight. And I think from an economic perspective, it will help our community as well, especially when we have vacant storefronts in downtown Sydney. And this particular store, I believe, has been vacant for many, many months. So do we want it to continue to be vacant? Because that sends a message to people as well when they walk down our street and see vacant storefronts that aren't active, they're inactive. And that's worse, in my opinion. Thank you.
I'll speak for a second time, very briefly, that as I mentioned, more than half of the 375 business licenses are off Beacon Avenue, and I don't think we're relegating them to dark alleys or that they're in some way inferior, social products or services that are being provided. This is not about cannabis. This is for me, and I know some other councillors have spoken. It's about inactive storefronts. Please do.
Thank you. If I may to staff, do we have an idea of how many empty stores we have on Beacon? Do we have any kind of number?
Through the mayor to Councillor Fallett, staff did a count specifically on storefronts facing Beacon Avenue between Rest Haven and the waterfront last Friday. And there are, including this location, 6 empty storefronts by our count.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Again, after 26 years of retail experience, I would suggest that those premises being unrented have more to do with there no longer being 8 businesses on the former corner property that's been purchased and is subject to redevelopment. Again, businesses like to locate where there's going to be activity, and there's been no activity there for a number of years now. And there's nothing foreseeable, certainly not a date as to when there will be activity there again. Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just speak to the suggestion that was made that one possibility, may be to process this, in other words, approve it, and then, look back to address the zoning bylaw on retail locations on Beacon, should that be the will of council. And for me, I'm uncomfortable with that suggestion, simply because if we were to agree to this one and then look to revisit and find that we do want to revise the bylaw by consensus on council, that we end up in a monopoly scenario potentially with one location on Beacon. And so where I was comfortable with perhaps seeing this tabled, this secondary suggestion I'm not comfortable with. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other speakers. Councillor.
I'd like to move that we table this until after the zoning amendment that's proposed in the next recommendation is determined.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Councillor Duncan?
I still, as Councillor Wainwright says, remember, it's a zoning amendment. It goes out to public hearing. You're supposed to be making your decision based on what the public tells you and the data you get. And we have had 3 councillors, 3 people at this table state that no matter what the public says, no matter how many people line up and say, no matter how many businesses line up, no matter how many people in the audience, no matter how many letters we get, we are not going to allow it on Beacon because we are firm in our opinion. So while this is a good idea in theory, because we could in theory change our mind, it's clearly not going to happen. And it doesn't have anything to do with the amount of public feedback and uncertainty we have here. We might as well just call it what it is and say, it doesn't actually matter what the public wants here, despite the fact that was kind of the campaign thing that most people on this council went with. What matters is people's firmly held beliefs. We also just heard that apparently, and I didn't know this, that the active storefront regulation has been in for at least 18 years, and we still have a whole lot of inactive businesses on Beacon because they've been there for over 18 years. So we've had this bylaw in place saying we got to only have new businesses, active storefronts, because if we don't, the whole thing will tank. And somehow that didn't happen, unless we're going to say those 6 active storefronts somehow, we're saying that the reason that they just tanked is because we've got new construction on there, and that's what tanked them. But what didn't tank them was this clearly is not about the active storefront. Again, like this is about sticking to a preconceived idea about how businesses should be behaving or how people should be behaving in the presence of active storefront or not, versus what the public has very clearly said they will behave. So, well, I really appreciate what Councillor Wainwright has tried to do by tabling it to try and open it up so that council could hear from the public again. I really don't see the point in going through the kangaroo court like process again. Let's just call it what it is and say this council is not open to hearing from the public on what we want on Beacon Avenue.
I'd just like to speak for a moment. I would like to stress that I think myself, and from what I've heard from a number of councillors, that we have listened to the public, and I spoke at the outset that this is, people in the community are firmly on both sides of this issue. All the information wasn't out there. There wasn't reference on the storefront window to the zoning bylaw number 2015. I didn't even see reference to it in the media. So in terms of people making their decision, and the outcome of this, by denying this application, I fully expect there to be a cannabis retail location on a side street or Bevan Avenue, within a year. It's a case of us going through the process in terms of our zoning and decision making. So I don't think it's a case of shutting out public. I've listened to the public and I've tried to be reasoned through it through the entire process. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I need to comment that also that the perception that we're not listening to the public.
Point
And
of order.
Oh.
We've got a tabling motion. We should deal with the tabling motion. We should not be debating the main motion anymore.
no, well,
Okay, well,
okay.
your point of order is taken, so if there's anyone who wishes to speak on the tabling motion, I'll call the question. Those in favor of tabling? Opposed? 4 opposed. The motion fails. So we have the original recommendation on the floor.
Call the question.
We'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to recommendation 6. Committee recommends, and I so move, that an amendment to zoning bylaw number 2015 be made to prohibit cannabis retail locations on Beacon Avenue.
Second.
Discussion? We'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries.
Next recommendation, and I so move, that staff be directed to bring forward an amendment to section 2B of policy DV-015 that removes the requirement for active and transparent storefronts for cannabis retail store locations.
Second.
Discussion? We'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimous.
Thank you. We now move to the 8th recommendation. It was a busy meeting. Development variance permit application number DV 100285 at 10379, 10383, and 10387 All Bay Road to retroactively approve the construction of 2 sets of beach stairs and the alteration of an existing set of beach stairs. Referral from council meeting of October 15, 2019. Recommendation, I so move that option 3 be approved as follows. 1, that all owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet, of 10379, 10383, and 10387 All Bay Road be notified regarding development variance permit application number DV 100285 to reduce the required setback to the natural boundary from 7.6 meters to 0 meters in order to legalize the construction of 2 beach access stairwells and the alteration to an existing stairwell within the required setback to the natural boundary, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance, subject to the following condition, and 2, that the applicant forfeit a $10,000 portion of the landscape deposit to go towards environmental enhancement in the Roberts Bay environmentally sensitive area.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor Garnet.
Yeah, I'll be voting against this recommendation, and appreciate the comments from the speaker this evening, echoing much of what I believe. Experienced developer, I fully expect that the rules were known. I'm concerned about what this says to other developers going forward, that let's just build the stairs, and because it's an environmentally sensitive area, they won't make us take them down. It could happen again, and it probably will. And I understand the concerns of council about going in and disrupting it once, twice, maybe 3, whatever have you, but these rules are rules. It's an environmentally sensitive area for a reason, and they broke the rules, and we're essentially letting them off the hook with basically no penalty whatsoever. And what message does that send? It sends the message that, yeah, it's an environmentally sensitive area, but if we build them, what are they going to do? They're not going to want to go in there again. Let's get away with it. And that's not how we should be protecting our areas that are important. I believe that we should have gone with option 1, take them out, return it to the way it was. And this will send a message that this will not be tolerated in the future. Thank you.
Your speakers. Councillor Duncan.
So just to clarify, the rules are in place because it is an environmentally sensitive area, because we want to protect the environmentally sensitive area. And they did do that. That was one thing that they never didn't do. They did their archaeological permits perfectly. They did their protection of the trees. They did all of the actual protection of the area correctly. The thing that they didn't do correctly was they built the stairs real ugly instead of building them pretty. So what we're going to do here is tell people not that it's not okay to build stairs, because no matter what, your $1 million home is going to get a pair of stairs. And I'm pretty sure they weren't able to charge more because the stairs were ugly versus than the pretty slate ones we would have made them build. I'm pretty sure they could have charged possibly more if they'd had more attractive set of stairs. It does suck that we can't send them a message, but whether it comes to trying to show them that the rules are in place to protect an area or not, I am still wanting to show that we'd rather protect an area versus punish somebody. And we have no effective means of punishing them. That does suck. But I still have the ability to protect the area to the extent that I ever did. And so for that reason, I'll vote for it.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, I think, explained it very well. I concur that their fault was not in just doing anything necessarily bad to the environment. They did everything they were supposed to do. They got the archaeological permits from the province. They protected the trees. They protected the blue heron nests. They did all of the environmental things that they were supposed to do. The thing that was missing is that they didn't get the permit for the stairs. And the stairs probably should have been of a different sort of material. So yeah, they messed up on that, and it's unfortunate. However, I feel like by punishing them, it would be, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face sort of thing, is that we're gonna show you, and so we're gonna disrupt that whole environmental sensitive area again by having them pulling them out, and then they'll still be able to go and get a permit to go and put them back in again. So for the same reasons as Councillor Duncan, I think it's unfortunate, but if we're really concerned about the environment, I'm okay with what's proposed here.
If I might speak for a moment, just a point of clarification in terms of ugly and pretty stairs. I think we've had it reported from staff that it's a case of whether this is a permeable structure or not. And the fact that it was not a permeable structure, and it was not permeable and a structure, required a variance permit, which they did not apply for. If they had chosen to put in a permeable surfaces for a stairway, for example, gravel and flagstone, they could have had a DP minor, which would not have had to come forward to council. So I think there is a difference in terms of whether one set of stairs is a non-permeable structure versus one that is the difference of it being environmentally sensitive or environmentally friendly, and the reason for the different application process. I think it's the case now that I agree with the councillor that has spoken to say that the disturbance has occurred. We do have a set of concrete stairs there. I think there would be a minimum of disturbance to the area to have the removal of those concrete stairs taken out. And I think, as was recommended in another staff option presented to us at last meeting, the option was that we deny the variance and that they remove the stairs, but at the time they are removing the stairs, they apply for a DP minor such that when they're taking those concrete stairs out, they can immediately replace it with permeable material such that it will be environmentally friendly for the long term. And that's the option that I would be in support of, so I will be voting against this option. Do we have any other speakers? Councillor Garnett.
That's a compromise I'd be willing to support. But I think it's also important to say that it has been mentioned that they followed all the environmental, well, if they had done that, they wouldn't have built the stairs, so that's not actually a true statement. In one area, they didn't satisfy what was required. But I think your suggestion, Mr. Mayor, is a reasonable approach that I'd be willing to support. Thank you.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, so
if you were to-
it's not a change of the motion that's on the floor. The one point I would like to add is that at one time I did consider the penalty, but given the statutory limitations on the town and this council, we certainly cannot impose a penalty commensurate with the financial aspects of this situation. And quite frankly, having thought it through again, I'm in favor of the reasons I said I would be voting the way I am. If we have no other speakers, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? We have 3 opposed. The motion carries.
And the final recommendation that came out of committee meeting was development permit application number DP 100796 and development variance permit application number DV 100286 at 9570 and 9574 5th Street to relax requirements for retaining walls in order to construct a 4-story, 16-unit multifamily residential development. It's a referral from council meeting of October 15. Recommendation, I so move. 1, that following the receipt of revised drawings as per council resolution 2019.36.475, owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet, of the properties at 9570 and 9574 5th Street be notified of development variance permit application number DV 100286 to relax the setback requirements for retaining walls taller than 1.2 meters, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of variance. And 2, that if council authorized the issuance of development variance application number DV 100286, then development permit application number DP 100796 to permit the construction of a 16-unit condominium building be brought before council for consideration of approval with the following conditions. A, that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit, pay to the town a deposit in the amount of 115% of the estimated cost to complete the hard and soft landscaping for the development. B, that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit, register a flood hazard covenant on the title of the property referencing the submitted engineer's report. And C, that the property owner shall, prior to the issuance of building permit, register a restrictive covenant on the title of the property with the town as a signatory prohibiting the future strata council from passing any bylaws that may restrict occupancy of the building based on age.
Second.
Discussion.
Okay.
Councillor O'Keefe?
This time, right? This is right. Okay. So no, so as I started to say before, I will vote, I'll vote in favor, but I do feel the requirement to at least address some of the comments that residents have made, and, you know, I share their frustration that this is going to go forward. I expressed my displeasure with this when it first was brought forward. I'm not completely convinced that it supports as many things in the official community plan as was stated. However, having said that, the zoning that's in place allows for this, and so it didn't seem that there's any legal and fair way that we could deny this. So I will, with regret, support the motion. Thank you.
I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to number 11, staff reports, and item 11A is curb ramp design, and we have a report from staff. We'll just pause for a moment. We have a staff report dated October 21st.
I'll move the recommendation that staff bring forward a budget amount to replace existing curb ramps for consideration by council during annual budget deliberations, with priority being given to the Beacon Avenue at 5th Street intersection as identified by the letter writer.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So I'm in favor of this, but I'm just some comments or questions to staff through you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I'm wondering whether staff would be anticipating a phased-in approach with these curbs. And I guess what I'm thinking is I'd be concerned about we're rushing out next year to do all these things, and then we find that they don't work as expected, that there's some other sort of issue. And so hoping that we'll do it on a gradual basis and then monitor feedback that we get on that. And I guess the other thing that was in my mind was that, as we know, the province is going through a process to look at new legislation for accessibility, which includes roads and the built environment. So I'm also anticipating that there might be some additional information in terms of guidance and specifications that might come out of that. So.
Through mayor to councillor, yes, we will be rolling it out on a gradual basis. The intent would be for new developments or anything where a sidewalk was being replaced anyway, we would use this for now, and replace certain curbs that are a real issue over several years. Do it as a program. And we will review feedback as we go. This is just a draft design. It's not set in stone at this time. So yes, we're open to feedback. And if there are any other changes coming from the government, from the provincial government, we would definitely incorporate them as it goes.
And one more question, if I may. So I know we're mainly focused on our streets and sidewalks, but I was also thinking that with the amount of development going on in our side streets and with the number of these larger multifamily dwellings that have underground parking with driveways that come out onto the sidewalk, are we also thinking about putting similar sorts of things on the edge of the sidewalks bordering those driveways? I'm just thinking of a blind person, once those all those new buildings on 3rd or 4th or wherever they are, and going down there where is there 3, at least a couple of underground parking lots. And so would it be useful for us to be making it a requirement for developers who have underground parking lots that are crossing sidewalks to make it a requirement, this type of requirement for them?
Yes, we have talked about that in the engineering department, but we hadn't settled on a design yet for it, the best method of doing that. We've talked about it, and we'll continue to talk about it and come up with a solution to that, because we do see that being an issue.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other Councillor questions? Thank you for the report. I happen to have traveled in some different communities, most recently Kelowna and London, Ontario, and interestingly, they're different colors. I've seen white, red, yellow, and sidewalk colors. So, and interestingly, just returned this past week from London, Ontario. They had put these extensively through, their population is 383,000, so about the size of Greater Victoria. They'd put them through extensively in their downtown and residential neighborhoods in red with the metal nubs on them. And just recently they started putting in, instead of those, they started putting in these grooves in the corner sidewalks as is proposed. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Move to item 11B. No, 11B's been removed. We'll move to item 11C. We have the agreement for the Sydney Street Market Operator. A report from staff dated October 22nd.
I'll move that council provide the mayor and CAO authority to negotiate a renewed agreement with the existing Sydney Street Market Operator, West Coast Impressions, based on similar terms to the existing agreement.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Just a few comments or questions, perhaps for consideration. I wondered whether, in preparing this, whether we had consulted with the SBIA and other community groups to see if there was changes that they might like to see in the agreement.
Well, I'll let staff answer first, but I can comment that having known the operator for quite some time, she's in regular contact with the businesses on Beacon Avenue where the streets are closed, and probably the most significant factor still of concern to several businesses is if the operating hours go back to what they were. The market was 20 years old this past year, and for the first, I don't know, first 6 or 8 or 10 years, it used to start at 5 o'clock. Setup used to start at 5 o'clock, and it just provides that extra half hour of activity for businesses open on Beacon Avenue at a time that is generally busy during the day as other employees are finishing their day. But I'll let staff add to.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Yeah, similar comments exactly with respect to the startup time, and I know there's been regular interaction between the market operator and the BIA through CAG. I believe the market operator is a regular attendee to CAG and a participant in that organization. So I know there's regular discussions on the topic.
And just,
go ahead.
Can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
So I'm just looking, number 4 under operational requirements, and one of the things is it talks about including appropriate opportunities for the nonprofit sector, and incentives for downtown, focusing on the nonprofit sector. And just anecdotally from different community groups, it sounds like in the past that it's been difficult to get a table. So I'm hoping that I would like to see sort of a better definition of what appropriate means. So maybe if we can be more specific in that, whether it's, I don't know, 4 groups a night or what, I'm not sure how many have been allocated in the past, but I'd like to see something more specific and definitive rather than just appropriate. So for your consideration. And then I'm just curious about, the document also talks about an annual report and quarterly report in terms of the revenue. I don't recall seeing, do we normally get those, or does that just go to staff?
Yeah, typically it just goes to staff, and we review that. Have to say that the surplus revenue has decreased significantly over the years, and certainly not as significant as the initial years with respect to surplus.
Okay, I wouldn't mind seeing it, just to take a look if that's possible. And then just one other thing, just in regards to vendor requirements, paragraph 13 on page 5, just talking about the different requirements. I'm just wondering, is it required that vendors have a business license to participate in the market? Is that something that needs to be a part of the agreement, that vendors must have a valid business license in Sydney, or?
No.
Okay, all right. And then I guess my other question is about, is there any liability for issue for us with those vendors who sell homemade food products? Is that something we have to be worried about?
Yeah, I believe they still have to get all the approvals through VHA in terms of the food safe requirements, etc. So I know the market operator is quite stringent on that, and requires again all of the necessary approvals prior to allowing them in the market.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, I didn't see it in the agreement, so I'm just wondering if that's something in terms of in the agreement that they sign with the vendors.
Andrew just indicated as well, they all have liability insurance as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I guess.
Sorry, if I might interject for just a moment. If you're selling food, you have to apply by the health standards. They're enforced, so we don't need to enforce them.
Okay, I was just wondering, in terms of when we're talking about vendor requirements, whether that was something that needed to be stated in the contract with the vendors. So for your consideration, if you think it's required or not. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Rentoul?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I may, through the staff, and forgive me if I missed it in here, but I was looking for references around either a requirement for the provision of portable washroom facilities or an obligation on the part of the town to provide the washroom facilities as are available publicly. I'm hopeful that council will have a discussion through certainly the budget process around being able to further address public facilities. but I wanted to ask the question and see if it's referenced in here or if it intended to be. Thank you.
So I believe discussions will come up around requirements for portable washrooms as part of the market. I know it's been raised and discussed in previous years about that as being a requirement. There's obviously a cost associated with that, but a lot of discussion. We're aware of the discussion with respect to the need for it, so it's something that we'll raise with the market operator for this upcoming year.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to amendment agreement, the Peninsula Fire and Emergency Mutual Aid to include confined space rescue. We have staff report dated October 21st.
I'll move that the amendment agreement to include confined space rescue as an additional joint service under the Peninsula Fire and Emergency Program Mutual Aid Agreement be approved.
Second.
Discussion? I just want to comment, thank you to staff and to the chief and assistant chief. I know work, and we've taken some leadership on this on the peninsula, and I think it's great that while there are already mutual aid agreements and the three departments are working together, this is another opportunity to work more effectively and efficiently in this area. Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, through to the Deputy Chief, just around comments on response times. So, for example, this proposes the shared use of equipment and shared training of human resources. Operationally, I assume, in that it's being moved forward by the fire chief, that you're comfortable with response times under this agreement. Potentially, but also if you could comment a little bit in terms of who is trained for the confined space entry, contrasting full-time firefighters to volunteers, if you would, please.
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. The reason we're going to house the trailer at our fire hall is we have a greater complement of staff during the day, and most likely if we're going to have an event, it's going to be during the day, Monday to Friday, looking after public works staff on the peninsula. So our response model will be one utility vehicle with the trailer, and we have two certified members on staff, as well as we have one member at Public Works as well on our team. So we look to bolster that in 2020, but at this time we have 4 members that are certified, 3 employed by the town of Sydney and 1 as a volunteer.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have agreements with regards to the Sydney Sculpture Walk, a report dated October 21st.
I'll move staff recommendation number 1 that council.
Are you on?
No, there we go. Sorry, number 1 that council approve the renewal agreement and revised new art agreement, and number 2 that staff be authorized to execute agreements with existing and new artists for the continuation of the Sculpture Walk program.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
So just some questions about the agreement. I'm on page 2, number 5. It says the artist will be responsible for the costs of fabrication, delivery, and installation of the artwork. I didn't see anywhere about what happens when it's sold. So is the person that who buys it, are they responsible for for the cost of taking it down and the packaging and having it delivered? So would the town have a role in that? And who covers those costs? So I don't know if we know that, but it would be nice to have it clarified in the agreement. If it isn't already, maybe I didn't see it.
The town would always assist to ensure there was no damage to our infrastructure, but the rest of the obligation would be on the seller.
Okay, so I'm just wondering whether that needs to be included in the agreement so that it's clear. Just a suggestion. I'm also a little bit foggy about the next one, number 6, where it says, budget permitting, the town will provide a standard base foundation for the artwork at the town's expense. So I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable with budget permitting. So it just seems to me either we should or we shouldn't.
The proponent had the same concern, but I threw it in there because even if council approves a future budget for the continuation of Sculpture Walk, we might not always have the capacity to add as many as the artist would like. I'd like to think that if we move forward, we'll put sufficient money aside for it, but we might not be able to handle as much capacity as
Yeah, I
the
guess.
artist would like.
Yeah, I guess just my concern is that there's going to be an expectation that we will do that, and so I'm just wondering if it's not something that we're going to commit to, whether it should even be in there. And it does say in the previous paragraph that the artist would be responsible for the cost for fabrication and installation.
I think, sorry, if I might interject for a moment, I think
Okay.
it might be some cases where the nature of the art doesn't require it, and so
Oh.
the circumstances I don't think are going to, could be unique in some cases. Sorry, I don't mean to
Okay.
interject
Yeah,
again, but
sure.
Councillor Fallon, did you wish to speak on this particular point?
Just something that I've come across in my research as I'm looking at public art policies from different communities is when a municipality takes out a percentage of their budget or a dollar value towards the purchase of public art, what they're also then doing is out of that amount, they take 10% that is for the installation and the maintenance and repair. So that budget is already set up right away. And I think that's something when we look at creating a policy for that we should consider as well, so that we're not caught after the fact looking at how are we going to budget for this.
Okay. Councillor O'Keefe, did you want to continue? Or Councillor
yes.
O'Toole, did you wish to speak to that point? No.
Okay, just a couple more things. So in clause 15, it talks about the copyright of the artwork, and the proposal, is the property of the artist. And so what I was just wondering in regards to that with copyright, there's usually issues in terms of reproducing pictures of artwork. And I'm just wondering if this is the case, do we need to insert a clause stating that the town is given permission to photograph the art and use it in printed material for advertising purposes?
Couldn't hurt.
Okay. And then I guess on number 17 about appraisal or declared value statement, I guess my question is, who sets the cost for the artwork? Is that, I see that the artist shall provide the town with an appraised or declared value. And is that the value that it would be listed for sale? And is it the artist then that sets the price for purchase, or does the town have a role in that?
It would be the artist that sets the purchase price, but declared values are always problematic because just because they say that it's worth 20,000, you don't know that until it actually sells for that price. So
Right.
it's not an exact science, but we
Okay.
try our best.
Okay, that's good. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, through to staff. And again, if I've missed the reference in here, please feel free to point it out to me, Mr. Hissick. In that we're looking at the budget with an aim to purchase at least 2 of the sculptures, possibly more through the course of time. I'm wondering if these agreements shouldn't reference our right of first refusal to purchase pieces at a mutually agreeable price. Is that enclosed in here at any point, or would you be comfortable with the insertion of a right of first refusal in favor of the town to purchase?
Councillor, I'm afraid I'm going to need a bit more information about how you see that working. I mean, certainly with the 2 we've committed to, one of them they've already reduced the price. So, but as for future purchases, are you curious, I mean, to know that if an offer comes in to purchase it, the town should have one last opportunity to buy it instead of the proposed purchaser? Is that the idea?
Or vice versa. The town proactively could see a piece that is extremely, well suited for its placement, has been well received. I don't think a right of first refusal would be unusual in this context, and so yes, similar to what you've described, or to the town proactively looking to purchase art and showing its commitment to the Sculpture Walk.
It's actually not a bad idea to put that in there for not just the existing, but potential future new art, so that the town would have the opportunity first before it goes out to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Good points. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We're moving on to the status update of outstanding canceled action items. Report from staff dated October 21st.
I'll move the recommendation that the report be received for information, and 2, that council resolution number 2016.15.15 to undertake a survey of residents regarding tax rate setting be rescinded.
Second.
Discussion? Call, Councillor O'Keefe.
I just had a question in regards to the pedestrian pathway, and it's mentioned that there's been consultations with representatives from Eaglehurst Developments, and I'm expecting that we will also have consultations with Summergate residents as well. Is that fair to assume? Okay. That's fine. That's all I have.
No, that's great. Good question. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move to the budget variance report for the first 3 quarters of 2019. Report from staff and recommendation.
I move that this report be received for information.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank staff. I know under the previous agenda item, I'd previously asked on another occasion about the community safety building and a full accounting of that project. I see it's referenced in here, and so I'm thankful for that and look forward to seeing that report from staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
I actually don't have one question about this, but I just wanted to compliment staff on like a very thorough report. And as I flipped through the 67 comments, I thought, okay, my questions are answered. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I do have a couple of questions. Note number 6, which is with regards to the RCMP contract billings. So I understand the explanation that's given there, but it talks about what anticipated savings might be, and it refers to surplus funding being used in the past. And I'm just wondering if there's fluctuations of that magnitude. Would it be worthwhile to have a reserve for RCMP that you could actually over time see whether you're, because once you know the money goes to reserve, you never really have it as a record of where the RCMP building is in terms of a cost center?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We actually do keep track of what the annual savings are on the contract going back at least 12 years.
Oh, okay.
So while the suggestion of setting up a specific reserve has been made before, any savings we have go into surplus anyway, so we're just, if we ever need it, we can take it right back out of there. I don't really see the point of setting specific funds aside.
Yeah.
And if we need that number, we have it.
No, and I appreciate that reasoning. It would just be nice, you know, if something had to happen with the building. For example, we had the boiler situation this past year that you knew you had money in that particular RCMP reserve, but we're still managing, so I appreciate that. The next is with regards to point 8, and on your, it's under protective, bylaw enforcement is under protective services, and all of those are obviously protective services, but within bylaw enforcement, we have building inspection, bylaw enforcement, animal control, business licensing, parking enforcement, and then building permit revenues, which are, of course, fairly substantial on the revenue side. I'm just wondering why that's put into bylaw enforcement within protective services and not down, say, in development services as its own line item.
A lot of these classifications go back a long ways to StatsCan reporting. So building inspection is considered a protective service traditionally. So effectively they're enforcing the building bylaw, if you want to look at it that way. But functionally, yes, they do report to development services.
Okay, that line item is generally a 6-figure item each year?
Building
building
permits,
permit revenues?
Definitely 6 figures.
Okay. I was just thinking for that reason alone that if it was broken out into a separate line item, but I'll leave that as a comment. The last I'm sorry, I'll have to ask it offline because I'm just I'm moving now to item 30. Sorry, I'm moving it to actually the comment or the paragraph under capital expenditures. And the last 2 sentences are comments on certain specific capital projects follow below, and we see those and they're helpful. More complete information will be available in the year-end financial results report. Can you remind me when that is received by council?
It usually comes out following the audit, so sometime around May, in conjunction with the variance report and with the financial statements.
Okay, I'm just wondering if that information isn't more helpful to council at budget deliberations. Just a comment.
We can bring preliminary information forward at that time. It's just most capital projects that we're putting forward for the new year don't have relation to what happened in the past year. There are some multi-year projects, but what we do is we project the year-end reserve balances already for you, so that's what goes into funding the next year's capital.
Okay, thank you. My next question is on number 31, and is my last question, on computer replacement. So I was pleased to see, and I forget the magnitude of the amount here, 31, it's a $180,000 budget item, and 62,000 spent year to date, and the positive comment that although we expect more expenditures in the remainder of 2019, several items identified for replacement have had their useful lives extended and replacement postponed. So in the case, so let's just say that $80,000 wasn't expended when we come to the end of 2019, would that $80,000 then go towards the next $180,000 replacement? Reserve, sorry?
Anything we don't take out of reserves remains in there, and it prevents us from having to raise the annual contributions.
Right, so we don't have to take the money from wherever to put it in reserve. Okay, thank you. Thank you for those questions, and thank you for the detailed report. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. And we have item 11H, 2020 budget timelines, and a report from Mr. Hisik.
I'll move the recommendation that council set the following schedule for the 2020-2024 financial plan meetings. January 20th, presentation of draft budget at Committee of the Whole. February 3rd, preliminary budget discussions at Committee of the Whole. February 18, budget deliberations at special Tuesday council meeting.
Second.
Discussion. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item 13, correspondence.
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
Powell.
I'll recuse myself. That is my strata.
Okay, and Councillor Fallot is referring to item 13A, the Summergate Village land use contract in R4 zoning, and we have a letter from Summergate Village Strata President dated October 9th and a recommendation from staff. Now, we have an amended recommendation. Suggested revised. Do you have that before you, Councillor?
Yeah, let's
I'm sorry,
try-
I don't, but if you...
Oh, I have something. It's a little bit different.
Do you have a
but
question first?
I was gonna make a motion. Shall I proceed?
Please do.
Okay. So I move that staff convene a meeting open to all Summergate residents to discuss the potential scope, process, and timing of the possible amendment to the town zoning bylaw relating to the expiry of the land use contract at Summergate Village.
Okay, do we have a second there?
Second.
Okay, I just have a comment, and I see perhaps staff have a comment as well. I think I appreciate the intent of engagement with them, but staff may wish to have a discussion with a group of individuals rather than convening the entire residents association together to start. And perhaps a comment from staff.
If I can I get that motion again, because staff is so
Sure.
particular.
Slowly, Councillor O'Keefe.
Okay. That staff convene a meeting open to all Summergate residents to discuss the potential scope, process, and timing of the possible amendment
Possible zoning amendment.
to the town zoning bylaw relating to the expiry of the land use contract at Summergate Village.
And so my question through to staff is, does that in some ways perhaps limit us in how we might approach it first with saying that we need to convene a meeting?
Do we have a seconder?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I guess my comment is more a request for clarification. Was the intent of that motion that staff meet with the members of the strata to glean their opinion on what they would like to see and then do further work on an amendment, or do the work on what the scope of an amendment might be and then present that to the strata for comment?
What I was envisioning is having a meeting with all Summergate residents to basically talk about what would be the process and the scope in moving forward with this amendment. And so the reason, I'm bringing this up is because at the council meet and greet, I had 3 different people, residents of Summergate, approach me that had concerns about this, and I've had others subsequently, contact me at phone and email. And their concern is that it's something that's very important to them. They're not feeling like they're getting information from their strata. They're not feeling involved. There seems, and so I think it's important. I was thinking about if there was some sort of zoning bylaw taking place on my street, that I would like to be engaged in that process and hear firsthand from staff what was going to happen in my neighborhood. And I wouldn't be comfortable myself letting a handful of residents from my street participate and then for me to get the information filtered from them. So I guess I was going back to, discussions we've had previously about having at least some sort of meeting with Summergate, open to all Summergate residents, to find out what the process will be in moving forward with the amendment. Not necessarily to go there to say, here's what it is, here's how it's going to be, but more, here's what this means, here's the process that will take place, and then maybe subsequent to that, you would get into more of more engagement with the residents, depending on what you saw was necessary to move forward.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Humboldt and Councillor Wainwright.
Again, I'll defer obviously to Corey for comment, a further comment on this. I guess from my perspective, rather than staff proceeding with some sort of engagement process with Summergate regarding what the potential scope, process, timing, etc. might be in terms of zoning, I think it would be more prudent to have staff actually look at developing, I guess, an approach or outline and bring it back to council for consideration and get some direction from council at that point on next steps. And staff can have some recommendations associated with next steps. I'm a little bit concerned about staff jumping into a community engagement process with a neighborhood on a potential rezoning, especially knowing that there seems to be some differing views and perspectives on this. I just think it's better for staff to internally look at the potential scope, process, and timing, and what might be involved in terms of the kinds of zoning changes that staff perceive might be desirable. I know there have already been some discussions with both residents of Summergate at the staff counter, as well as discussions with strata members as well. I think staff have a fairly good grasp right now of maybe what some of the concerns are with the current R4 zone, as well as some of the concerns with respect to the land use contract. So again, I think having staff develop a report for council's consideration with some recommendations on next steps, which would for sure involve a level of community engagement and perhaps some sort of consultation process with all members of that community. But I think staff needs to develop that first before we jump into an engagement process.
Okay, I mean, I'm fine with that, so if we want to, if
Well, we'll just let, if Councillor Wainwright would like to comment first, and then.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I walk through Summergate Village basically every day, walking my dogs, and I've had residents talking to me, at various opportunities, and there certainly seems to be quite a range of views. Part of what or a lot of what I'm picking up is a form and character type of concern, as opposed to setbacks and the kinds of things we normally have in the zoning bylaw. The only zoning related concern I've heard people mention is number of stories. And so if it's a form and character thing, and this is a small lot kind of zone, this may be something that would be appropriate to address in the OCP. So I think it is. I see it important as staff being informed about what the neighborhood's concerns are, but if they've already been getting a lot of input on that, great, and then I think they could bring us a report basically in response to this. But I don't think it hurts to get the message out to Summergate, and this would be if staff sees it as being a relevant part of the OCP process, to let them know that that's likely to happen in advance of the zoning amendment, and that would be the better opportunity perhaps anyway for a lot of the concerns that I've been hearing about.
I guess a general comment on that. As part of the OCP review process, there would be a consultation process with Summergate Village to to look at the future of the village and what the OCP review might mean for them. The discussions with the strata with regard to this letter have been very discreet in terms of their scope. So I think they identified them in the letter, 3 basic issues that people are concerned about, and that the strata has come forward and said, in advance of the land use contract expiring, we're concerned about these 1, 2, 3. One of them is the form and character of 2-story structures versus 1-story structures. But generally speaking, that's all they're concerned about at this time. Definitely there would be a bigger discussion about longer term potential or issues or things like that in the OCP review process, but I think it would be good, given how tight the scope of that letter is and what they're requesting and what staff have discussed with them in terms of responding to that letter. I think good to keep those 2 issues separate. One is sort of near term and the other is obviously a longer term issue.
Councillor O'Keefe, did you wish to, or sorry, were you fine with that? Councillor O'Leary?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Councillor O'Keefe?
Well, I think it's a good suggestion to incorporate this as part of the OCP review. But, what I'm hoping is that we could at least do an information session for Summergate residents, because as I said before, I feel like there's a great deal of angst about this, just understanding what the process will look like, if there's questions about land use and other things. It would be nice to give them the opportunity to hear that information from the town. It seems like there's a bit of a communication issue sometimes between residents getting information through the strata, and so it would be nice if we could find some sort of middle ground there, not have a full plan exactly of what's going to take place, because if it comes under our OCP review, that's fine, but at least get some information to them to let them know at least what the process might look like, and their role in providing input into that.
Okay, if I might make a comment, excuse me, appreciating that there is a motion on the floor, seconded, but if that motion were to be removed, and a suggested motion along the lines of so we have a letter, and we were referring that, so if we refer it to staff to discuss, if we refer to staff to prepare a report on the scope, process, including engagement and timing of possible zoning amendment. And then that allows, staff to consider gives them the flexibility in terms of what the process would be going forward.
Sure.
Okay. So with regards to your first motion.
So do we want to just vote on it and defeat it, or withdraw? Am I allowed to withdraw my motion? Okay, yeah, sure.
Withdraw.
Yeah.
Okay, so the motion is withdrawn, and if
I'll move what the mayor just said.
Yeah.
further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Sorry? Are those in favor? Those in favor, yes. Motion carries. Thank you. Andrew, if you could, thank you. Welcome back. We'll now move to number 14, our bylaws, and we have two. 14A is bylaw number 2178 regarding tax exemption for St. Andrews Abbeyfield and Shoreline Medical.
I'll move that the bylaw be considered for adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And item 14B, bylaw number 2183, the revitalization tax exemption.
I'll move that the bylaw be considered for adoption.
Second.
Call a question. Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business. We have a number of items of correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. We have no notices of motion, no motion to go on camera, motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, staff and ladies and gentlemen who stayed this evening.